All righty, welcome. I am Heather Pierce Campbell, the legal website warrior. I'm an attorney and legal coach based here in Seattle, Washington. Welcome to another episode of Guts, Grit, and Great Business. I am so excited for our guest today. Oh my goodness, you are in for a treat. So Lana Shlafer, and is that the correct pronunciation? I should have.
Yes, it is.
I
Good
remembered.
job.
Thank you. So Lana Shlafer and we go back just a few years. We crossed paths. I think it was when I was getting ready to launch my second business. And Lana was one of my favorite people online. We actually ended up working together, but for those of you who don't know Lana, Lana is a mindset coach, a law of attraction expert, and author of the best-selling book, Manifest That Miracle. Learn why you don't have what you want and how to get it. Over the past decade, she has empowered thousands of clients and students to manifest what seems out of reach, including buying their dream home, healing from a chronic illness, and meeting their ideal partner. More than 20,000 people have participated in her manifesting challenges. Lana's energetic personality and no-holds-barred coaching has been featured in Forbes, TV One, and NPR. Lana studied at UC Berkeley and the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology. She lives in Puerto Rico with her amazing husband and 3 magical kids. Learn more at Learn more at lanashlafer.com. It's hard when I read it, like I want to say the other way, but I know it's Shlafer. So Lana, when I introduce you to other people, like I've always just thought like you are magical. And I love that you describe your kids as magic. Like everybody needs what you have. I have a sister who is a really vivacious blonde. And I always joke like, I wish I could just, like do this, squish her up for people not, that are not able to see us, like munch her down into like a little pocket size and put her in my pocket. That's how I feel about you. Like everybody needs you and needs your magic in their life. So welcome. I'm super excited to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. And who doesn't want to be called magical?
Right. It's the best. So you and I met, gosh, I think it's been about 5 years ago. And your path, it's been so fun to watch you even in that 5-year space, which I know is relatively short compared to how long you've been doing this work and, all of the things in your life that have led you here. For people that don't yet know you, take us back a little bit to kind of the beginning of your roots and tell us a little bit about your story.
It's always a tricky thing to summarize yourself in a few minutes or a soundbite.
Right.
So I'll just share, whatever I can, and then you can ask me more specific questions. I love that before we started this interview, you described it as not being on stage, but as a dinner guest at a party, right? So I feel like this is the perfect dinner conversation. So, I grew up in Russia, so I think that does define me to some degree until I was 12 years old in Siberia, a very cold place. And my dad is Jewish. My mom is not, but he always knew he wanted to get out. And there was a period of time in the early 90s when the USSR broke open and the countries, all the republics started becoming countries. And you could apply to leave to live in other places. So my dad applied everywhere. He applied to Israel, to Canada, to the US. And we ended up coming to the US through a series of really miracles looking back. And so I landed in San Francisco at 12 years old, having only seen America in movies like Beverly Hills Cop and all the comedies. And showing up kind of ripped off from my normal environment, all my relatives, just my mom, my dad, and my brother. And my dad had a really hard time getting a job. He has a PhD in math and was very accomplished professionally, but it was really challenging to show up and restart a new life. And same with my mom. And so we went through a lot of struggles and ended up kind of being latchkey kids, right? Because my parents just had to take care of the household. And recognizing that I never had a perspective on myself where I felt like I was different, but all of a sudden I was different from everybody. I didn't feel like I belonged. I had a really hard time adapting to the culture. And my sort of solution was, okay, I'm going to do what I can to sort of be successful and create the American dream. I think that's like an immigrant's mentality, right? So you're like, okay, if I just achieve enough, then I will feel like I belong. I will feel like I matter. I will, get all the things that I have lacked. So I worked my tail off and went to like one of the best schools, UC Berkeley. I graduated with, 3.8 GPA. I had 5 job offers out of college and ended up going into investment banking because it was like the most successful thing I could imagine. And it was really difficult when I achieved this dream. This was my first taste of like working. My parents got divorced when I was in college, so my family fell apart. I had developed eating disorders and I was really struggling, but I was like, if I just make it here. And I was one of the people that did make it. I did have a 6-figure salary at 23. I got to travel all over the world. I was very, good at the job and kept getting promoted. And I just hated myself and my life more and more and more, to the point where I felt like I was somebody playing a role of myself. And I was in a relationship where I felt like I was repeating patterns that I saw between my parents. And I was playing a role there, playing a role here. And it was at that point where I was just like, I don't know how to get out of this. I don't know any other way to live. I really was with my back against the wall. I thought about like running away to India or just exiting out of this life. And in the end, what I decided, I'm going to take a U-turn. I'm going to go study yoga. I'm going to go find something meaningful to do. And I'm going to take a year or two to just discover myself. And this year or two, at 26 years old, turned into now the rest of my life. But it was such a difficult decision at the time, because I felt like I was totally leaping into something that nobody in my lineage even thought about. Like, what makes you happy was not a luxury that people could afford to think about it. So I really broke from that. And it was a difficult period because I felt like I fumbled around and tried a bunch of things and, lived in a tent in Mexico and became a yoga teacher and then became a personal trainer and really couldn't make ends meet and spent all the money I had saved up and basically moved in with my parents at like 28, like jobless, broke, with no like real clarity on what I want to do. Single, like I thought I would be in this place by the time I'm 30. Actually, I didn't go to my 10-year high school reunion, I remember, because I was like, what the heck am I going to say? Like I was, smart, driven, blah, blah, blah. What the hell happened type of thing. And one of the reasons I share the story is because I feel like those were my most defining moments. That I took that pain and I turned it into gain. But so many people end up sharing the successes, and they're like, yeah, I'm in this like beachfront, dream home in Puerto Rico with my 3 magical kids and my amazing partner. And they don't share how they came from broken relationships and how they hit, sort of the end of the road in many ways. And so for me, I went to graduate school at the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology and did more and more healing. I got into law of attraction. I really worked on healing myself and eventually ended up, engaged and pregnant with my kids actually in grad school with twins at once. And I really felt like that was another pivotal moment where the tire hit the road for me. And I felt like everything I had practiced now mattered more than ever. And we ended up having this miraculous birth with my twins, who were born 33 hours apart, a home birth. So that was something that I never imagined as possible. And then for the next couple of years after that, I just kept using the mindset principles that I've learned and the healing that I've done, sort of to see how far I can reach. Like I took that same drive that I had for, making it in the corporate world. And I was like, how fulfilled and happy can I become? How much more meaningful can my life be? How much more of a present and joyous parent can I be? Because I did not feel like my parents had that luxury. And it really took me into amazing places. I started my business when people started asking me to share about it. I did all kinds of coaching and courses and memberships and eventually wrote a book. And so here we are and moved to Puerto Rico a couple of years ago. we joke that I retired my husband, but really he left his corporate career to focus on having a chance to be at home with the kids and to homeschool before he starts his business. And we've had many chapters in our life, and I feel like I've lived like 10 lives. So here's my not so short summary.
Well, no, it's very enlightening. And the pieces that I love about it are, as you described, like we often see people's arrival point. We see the end of that journey. We don't see, especially the inner stuff, we don't see what it takes to get there. And this concept of, there's a couple things I'd like to know more about, the piece about unfulfillment, right? And feeling like you were either living somebody else's life or a version of yourself that you didn't love, whatever that was that just because you thought that if you did the things you were doing, you were going to feel better about it? Was it really just about that inner feeling, or was it recognizing, like, culturally we're told if you do A, B, C, X, Y, Z, right, you've arrived, you should be happy, right? You should like have all the things. Yes.
Yeah. And it's especially hard place. And I find that a lot of, people who have a midlife crisis or now a quarter life crisis, I think, the new generations coming in, millennials are really brilliant. They're just not willing to suffer till they're 50 and then have a breakdown.
That's right.
Like existential crisis. I'm like, smart. Because I had kind of a quarter life crisis where at least if you have the hope of it will be better if you do this. I had the illusion that over there is better. But every time I got over there, it was not better. And so when the illusion went away, that's when hope went away. And that was a really tough place to be. And at the same time, I really felt like I had become who I thought I should be and had no idea who I am or who I wanted to be.
Yes. Well, it's so interesting, like to go back to your younger self, right? And for anybody listening, like I go back to the very start, for example, of my legal career. And I remember in my head having benchmarks like, oh, when I'm 10 years in, then I will really have figured it out, right? I will have enough experience to whatever the thing is. And for me, I was a kid that got into the legal world and I had no legal connections. I didn't know any attorneys. Like it ended up being a fit for me, but not because I actually knew anything about what that kind of life would be like, right? But it's interesting how we tell ourselves something or we buy into something about how life is going to be when we get there, right? And so I love breaking this down because I think it happens to so many of us in so many ways and so many different areas of life.
Well, we're indoctrinated into it from the get-go, right? It's kind of how our society up until this point for the last, 150 years in the industrialized society has been built, where your parents need you to be managed so that they can provide. And the school system is training you to be managed by the workplace. And so nobody was interested in, is this the only way? Is this the right way? It's more like, got to do this. And this is what needs to be done. And so kids aren't taught to connect with their emotions or now more and more, I think there's an awareness of, is this the only way to operate? Like, sure, we can have factories and we can have schools that are run like factories or prisons, depending on how you want to look at it.
Lots of little employees running around following the rules.
Right.
Yes.
Oh, until some people started asking the question, like, can it be any different or better? That question, I always say and I didn't come up with it, but I don't know who to give credit to, that the quality of your life depends on the quality of the questions you ask.
Yes.
And I feel like better questions lead to better answers and better quality of life. So it's like, can this be better? How can this be whatever, more innovative, more expansive, more satisfying, more fulfilling? My answers really came not because I asked for like years, what is my purpose? I don't think you can answer that question. I think if you can realize that your extra degree of fulfillment or meaning that day is your purpose, until all of those steps start to make sense in a bigger picture, but literally taking that step is the purpose today.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like,
Yes.
what makes me feel enlivened, inspired, connected? How can this feel more me or more better for me? Like, it really is a simple process, but it's just iterative.
Yes. Well, and I love that you brought up purpose, because I feel like there's a lot of people that feel like they get it wrong if they don't know their purpose. They're like, "Oh, I'm one of those folks that I just don't know what my purpose is." And so they feel lost, or they feel like they're wandering around. And I've learned, and I actually did an episode on this, but like, purpose is something that we get to create, and it's more like a string than it is like a single concept, or like, it's something that comes with us and that evolves, and we get to, hopefully by following little signs and following things that light us up and that we're interested in, right? We are closer to what is going to really help us be on purpose and really do work and show up in the way that we love to in the world that influences others, right? Becomes a bigger purpose. Yeah. But it's not something, I don't think, that like just hits us on the head one day.
No, I feel like it's something you paint like over and over and over for the rest of your life.
Yes.
It's like a painting, and and if parts of it don't quite feel right, then you paint over it. You can't erase it. You just add and expand and enhance. And I feel like the I guess value for other people is that you've created a masterpiece that added something to this world, that your painting, your creation, your existence, your presence added something. It enhanced someone's life or something in this life. Right. And I just think that question puts you on the wrong, in the wrong sort of a goose chase, where you're not going to find the answer. But asking yourself, what am I enjoying? What has meaning for me? Where do I feel most alive? What can I do today to enjoy this process? If I already do have this job, what can I do to enjoy it? Because that's the other tricky part, right? And this is more like mindset and law of attraction, is that you can't say, I really don't want this, I'm going to leave it now, because you can't ever leave anything, because that painting is already painted. You can paint over it, but it will be there. And so the key is to say, this is what it is. There are the parts that I like. There are the parts I don't like, or here's the clarity I got. Thank you for the clarity, this thing that I no longer want to have. Now, what do I want? Right? So it's like, you can't run away from anything. You have to be moving towards something else. You can't ever lose something or get rid of something. You just fill the space with so much of what you do want that what you don't want isn't relevant, and it's edged out.
Yes, I love that. It's a little bit like, just even thinking of our vision, right? We've got all of this stuff that we're actually aware of, whether we know it or not, right? It's in our periphery, it's somewhere in our vision, and we get to choose where to look. We get to choose, right? But it doesn't mean that it goes away or that it's not there, right? And so I love that. I love the way that you described that concept. In your own journey, because there's a couple things I want to ask you about. One, this concept of leaping or taking a U-turn or making sometimes what feels like a dramatic shift in life, right? Because I think a lot of people are in that place right now, having to evaluate, COVID, work, opportunities, parenting. Like, we have the opportunity to reevaluate a lot right now, and partly because there are new constraints, partly because we're being forced to. But before we get to the concept of leaping or U-turns, I want to dig into your ability, because at some point, like, I see, obviously you went to school for psychology, right? So I feel like it was part of you for a longer period of time, this interest in the inner work, right? Our minds, our mindset. Were you aware as a younger person that was there? Or did that really evolve and come out and flourish, like, once you made some of these hard choices?
So your past, or more like your perspective of your past, will change. When you change the present, you change the past and the future. And I have many, many versions of my past. And so when you ask me this question, it's tricky. Do I answer from the perspective I had when I was a kid, the perspective that I had when I was sort of in my misery, or the perspective I have now, because those are very different perspectives on the same situation. So I'll answer from now. I was always more interested in people than anything else. I had a very, logical, analytical, and heady intellectual, if you want to call it, father. And so obviously mathematics lives in numbers and logic and abstract kind of concepts. So I both loved the sort of the thinking about thinking and evolving your, I guess, capacity for thinking. And I found people far more interesting than anything else. So when I was in undergrad, I wanted to major in psychology at Berkeley. And my dad was like, that's a useless degree, both of my parents. And you know what, to some degree, they are right, because I do feel like it's so general in the undergrad that it really doesn't give you any specific skills or tools. I was also very good at math. And then I went into math and computer science because I just had the ability to do it. It's not what I loved, but I had the ability. And so there you go. Like all these people like, oh, there's so few women in sciences.
You can do this.
So, right. And so I could, but it doesn't mean that I wanted to. And as soon as I ended up getting into junior year, you're doing a lot of like the high level math where you sit by yourself and solve theorems. And I was like, this is not my jam. So I still didn't go in the route of psychology. I ended up graduating with an economics degree because that was sort of more real world application to the analytical thinking. And then in investment banking, I excelled at client interactions. I got put in front of clients as a super junior analyst because I was so great with people. I was, easygoing and interested in people, but also had this analytical side that I could get something done that needed to be done. But there was a lot of spreadsheets and a lot of analysis and risk and, analysis and writing reports that I did not love, but there were a huge part of like the level where I was at. But the thing is, there was like this carrot dangle. Well, when you become this, then, the junior analysts are doing this. But the more that I stayed with it and I looked around at the people, and I didn't want to be my boss and my boss's boss and my boss's boss's boss, they were not that happy, divorces, health challenges, like a lot of things that I was like, this is not success to me. And so looking back, I've always been more interested in people, and I've always been a fierce, I would say, lover, a bold lover, meaning if I can connect with someone and I can love them, to me, connection is love. I would do it even when it was to my detriment. Even when people, like, I would be reprimanded, like, you shouldn't get this personal with your clients. It's like my default is to get personal. Do you know what I mean?
Totally.
And so looking back, it was all there, but it was a big leap of faith for me to actually say, no, I'm going to go study this in graduate school, as a career. And still my parents did not understand at the time and all that. And for me, it was also that I wanted to heal myself. I mean, it was the path to healing myself. And I figure whatever else I do with it, I don't know. I didn't know if I was going to become a marriage and family therapist or continue to a PhD or whatever. But I really focused on, again, that purpose was what is going to make me feel better and take me one step forward. The best leaps. There's something else that I want to add. As you were speaking, I never actually articulated this. And this might sound like a harsh statement, but I stand behind it, is that it only feels like a leap or like you said, like a dramatic change when you feel unworthy. When you feel worthy, meaning my definition of worthiness is permission to feel good. Then it seems like the most reasonable, like, next step. Of course, I'm not going to stay in the way that people don't want to stay in an abusive relationship. I'm not going to stay in an environment where I feel in some way where I have to sacrifice something that matters to me, or feel, again, maybe abuse is too strong of a word, but where I feel so constricted and this doesn't resonate with me. If you feel worthy, meaning that you have permission to feel good and you believe that you can,
Well, and I
then
think
it feels like a decision that is like the not next natural step necessarily in a small way, but that it just feels resonant and right, and you can lean way into it.
Well, and I love that the piece about leaping and trusting, right? Either believing that it's going to work out or trusting, because I think there's the piece about just not knowing, right? So you can take a leap where you're moving jobs or moving careers or even moving locations, right? None of us really know how that's going to go, right? And we might hope that it goes well. But I think a huge part of the leaping process is that trust, not only in ourselves, that we can do it, we can show up for ourselves and, influence it in a way that moves in the right direction, but also just trusting that in life we're gonna go in the direction that we need to, even when we take leaps, even when we're moving into the unknown.
I feel like that sounds so beautiful. And to somebody who has had a lot of experience of trusting and feeling safe, where their primary caregivers were somebody they could trust, and they weren't in a place where they felt so unsafe and so traumatized, let's call it, in a way, that they could trust, that's amazing. I was not a trusting person, nor did I feel like I think that trust is something, and I like to take trust out of the equation altogether. But if I'm going to talk about trust, I'm going to talk about trial and error and discovery and experimentation. So I don't have to trust, I am testing.
Yes.
Right? But in other words, it is really discovering what works for you and giving yourself the room to explore. Because again, what you know for sure is that you do not want to be where you are if you are wanting to make a change. So what I'm offering, or what you are offering to yourself, is a for sure betterment of where you are. Now, it might be a kind of betterment you're not expecting, which is where, people are like, but I made the change, but then it was worse, right?
That's right.
But it taught you something, and it showed you what you know what you do want, you know what you don't want, right? It taught you, you've expanded, you've grown. It's why one of the biggest foci that I, recommend for people is not on creating stuff, but creating yourself. So that you're not just creating, successful businesses, and you're not, creating babies and creating whatever it is that you're creating, books, but that you're creating the you that can feel truly successful with those babies, with those partners, with those in those roles. Because there are plenty of people that create things that when they are not ready for that level, when they are not feeling worthy, and when they are not really truly internally caught up to that experience, it feels like a punishment. Think of a time when you achieved some level of success or some outcome, but it came at such a cost that it felt like a punishment.
Yes, it happens.
Then that's when people start getting jaded and saying, I don't want to leap anymore. I don't want to take those risks. And so I'm like, great, don't. Start taking smaller, more calculated, not necessarily risk, but experiments, and learn to support yourself in the process. That's what takes away the feeling of sacrifice or punishment.
Yes. Well, and that word experiment, I'm so glad you brought that up, because like one thing I regularly think of is that, and whether this is true or not, it's my perception that in society, we're not given a lot of flexibility to experiment, and certainly not as women, right? Yeah. I feel like there's a big...
Gotta get it right from the get-go.
Yes. And, this whole concept of like, oh, she made that choice to go pursue that in school. Or, this thing where, especially when we are making a choice that does not make sense to anybody else, right? The pressure can be a lot for people to handle, and especially in the younger portion of their lives, right? When that kind of outward pressure matters a lot to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So shifting into what has now become the work that you do, talk to us about your experience in school, moving beyond school, and really discovering like where your love lies and this gift that you have of really taking people on this journey through themselves, right? And creating more of what they want and asking more of the right questions. What did that look like for you?
You know, what happened as I took the steps on the journey is I fell in love with the journey. And I realized that the only like goal or achievement was for me to fall more in love with myself and that I win at each step.
Gosh,
and that
like I just have so much like, and for people listening, I hope you really let that sink in. Like that brings such a calm to me to even just think of it that way, right? And I think we learn, especially once we get farther into our adult life, like there is no there.
Yeah, the there keeps moving. It's like a moving target. It's a carrot in front of you that's going to keep moving and you never get there. So what is the point then?
Loving
what
it now.
is the point?
Yes.
And I feel like the point is to fall in love with the journey and have the best journey possible. And what that took me a long time to just begin to answer some of these questions. Well, what does make me love the journey? I mean, I really didn't know. You know, I was so used to like even going to a restaurant and choosing what I should eat versus what did I want to eat. It took me like years to be like, what do I like? And what does my body want? And what makes me feel good before, during, and after? Like it was so ingrained that you just like pick the thing. Like if I don't know, felt like I didn't eat enough protein that day, that's what I would pick for dinner because that's what I should eat. Like complete disregard for any connection with my body, which is such a wise and brilliant machine and the only true partner that you get to have from start to finish in your life. And what terrible relationships people have with the most important partner in their life.
Oh, isn't that the truth? I mean, I know you have, you know, because you've openly shared about your journey, you know, with your own relationship to your body and health and all of that. And I feel like none of us get to opt out of that. We all...
You have a body.
We have a body.
You can't get out.
And we have
well, you can, but you wouldn't want to.
You wouldn't want to.
Then you'd be clamoring to get back in. You're like, no, that's not. I mean, that's what a lot of times happens, right? When people get ill or something. And for a second they have like, wait a minute, this isn't given. Whoa. Yes. Right? It gives you that perspective.
Well, and I think a lot of people, I mean, and I can speak for myself, having my own body journey and, you know, growing up in a family that did a lot of body shaming and, you know, they're like, we all interact with people who are going to give us feedback about our body or about our looks or whatever it may be. And so we are all going to have our own journey in this regard. And the importance of really like this journey with ourselves and this journey with loving ourselves and loving who we are first and foremost, I think is the hardest part for so many of us.
Well, it's only hard because we haven't prioritized it, haven't developed the skills. It's like learning a language. It's only hard because you're listening to something that you don't understand. So it feels frustrating.
Well, and you're learning a language, and in some instances, you're unlearning somebody else's language about you. Right.
And the language of the body is emotions. It's sensations. Bodies aren't going to use words. And we are not taught to, you know, even like the whole like women called hysterical and emotional, it's looked at as less intelligent than thoughts and words. And so we already downgrade our bodies in that way, that they are just like supposed to serve us, and they're not that intelligent, which is why we've been tricked into somebody else telling us what our body needs to do and be and have. And like some person who you've never met in some book is going to tell you what you should eat and what you should do, even though you have a perfectly tailored, your trillions of cells are perfectly synced and vibing out loudly information for exactly what you need for you to be your best, feel your best, operate at your best with, thriving health and radiance and well-being. And the communication that we get to develop with our bodies, with ourselves, is the foundational relationship that determines all other relationships. If we are not listening to our bodies, are we really going to listen and hear and receive our partners or our kids or our friends or our clients?
Right. Well, and if we are not only not listening, but like disassociating from, turning off that voice, ignoring that voice, right? And for anybody who's done that for any length of time, like most of us have to unlearn that lesson because our body will speak up after being ignored.
Well, yeah. And that's the thing, is it's giving you signals all the time, and it will get louder and louder and louder and louder. And, and somebody will have, whether it's, some sort of disease or something happened that's, everything is a wake-up call. It's an opportunity for you to step into that. And the great thing is that learning this language is far easier because you've already known it. When you were a kid, you knew it. It's remembering more than learning, really. It is reconnecting instead of like starting something from scratch. And I feel like, I like to remind that to people. I'm like, you already know this. I'm just literally reminding you what you already know. And you know it by the way that it feels. Right. And so the beginning stages of, doing this miracle mindset training, as I describe in my book, and whether you do it through the book or you join my program, the first step we start with is an awareness log, an emotional and sensation awareness log. How does this feel? How does that thing? Where in my body do I notice it? You start to develop that communication, and it really is a relationship. So you've got to like learn about each other, right? You're like, body, I'm going to do this. How do you feel? Body's like, oh, I feel like this. I really like this. No, I really don't like this. This is how this works. This is how that works. It is something that you are co-creating. And a better question than most people asking, what should I do? Is how do I want to feel? And what do I want to create? What do I want to do? There's no should, there's no absolute set of rules that, are written in the sky somewhere that you need to follow. You really do create the rules, the system, the paradigm, and your role in it. You are the script writer and the author and the director and the producer and the person casting all of the supporting actors, and then the main actor in this play of life. So many of us did not learn. I know it was a huge realization to me. Wait a minute, like this isn't all set and now I just have to play in this play? You mean I can change the set and the setting and the script and the roles and like the whole, it can go from like a drama to a romantic comedy? Like what? It blew my mind. I mean, that's why I'm still so passionate about it, because I keep discovering new levels and nuances. There's no ceiling, I realized, on what I can conceive and create. And it becomes, again, the journey that I'm excited about. Not just, where am I going to get to? Okay, I'm going to get to this and I'm going to get to that. And I'm going to get to whoop-de-doo, the 5 minutes of woohoo, I'm here. And what about the other, 23 hours and 55 minutes in that day and every day?
Yeah. Well, this shift to really seeing ourselves as powerful creators versus just going through life. And if we don't create our own paradigms, our own rules, we are left to live and play by the other rules and the conditioning and the, you whip your body into shape and you don't listen to it. You eat this list of foods over here, and this is what most people do, right? Either on autopilot or...
And it's passed down because, you read a lot of parenting books and stuff. I purposely did not read those types of parenting books. I read more like self-realization books because I was like, I need to lead by example. And I want to look at my kids as whole, complete beings and hopefully not try to knock that out of them. It's like my main goal is. So I actually, there've been some moments where it's really challenging when you're like, I don't agree with what my child is saying, or I don't. So it's like, no, you want to say, no, you can't stay up. No, you can't eat chocolate all day. No, 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 no. But it goes against my understanding of what will be the most, I don't even know what the word is, the most loving and the most like healthy parenting, the most productive for my aims. I want to raise independent, powerful, conscious,
aware
human beings.
Yes.
So I can't be telling them, no, you're wrong, I'm right, and I'm just going to override all of your signals. So there's a lot of time and energy that goes into, even with when our now 4-year-old was like 2 or 3, it's like pausing everything in my day to be like, well, why do you feel this way? And what do you want? And it's not catering to them, because there are hard no's. And it's just being like, well, I know you don't want to sleep, and I know I need you to go to sleep. So how are we going to get both of our needs met?
Yeah.
How are we going to get creative? We are partners in this. I am not big and you're small, and I'm smart and you're stupid, and I'm going to tell you this top down kind of, we are co-creators in this. And how are we, I always say, I don't believe in compromise. I believe in creativity. So how are we going to get creative and find a way? So a lot of times we lay in bed together or whatever it is. And so I want them to feel seen and heard. And I also want them to recognize that I'm a person and I deserve to take up space and have needs and be seen and heard.
Yes. Well, and I think one of the things that's so beautiful about children these days, and I don't know if we were always this way, but I really feel like there is a dramatic shift in awareness of kids that are being born and like our children's age, and even millennials that you spoke about, right? They're no longer willing to work until they're 50 and then have a midlife breakdown. I feel like they've got democracy like embedded in them. These tiny little peanuts. I've got a 3-year-old. I've got an 8-year-old. We're navigating probably very similar things at times where, I want them to understand they have a powerful voice and they get to use it. And just because mommy's frustrated by what they're saying doesn't mean that they shouldn't get to say it or do it or have that choice. And so it's this tricky balance between, how do I guide them to express themselves in a healthy way? And like with my son who's 8, in a pro-social way versus in a way that harms other people or is frustrating to everybody around him, but also allows them to really be in tune and express their feelings. I mean, I was actually just reading a recent book about healing relationships and looking even at myself, even as aware as I think I am at times, right? There is still so much work to be done. And the author of this book, his name is Bill Ferguson, he was talking about how children have this brilliance born into them, this ability to cleanse themselves at any time. And they do it through expression, through emotion, through allowing themselves to feel what we as adults often tamp down and just don't allow ourselves to really feel.
Well, and it is passed down generationally. Like our, parents weren't allowed to feel this, and their parents and their parents and their parents. And so it's passed down. But I want to start a new trend, a new family, dynamic. And it is taking ourselves out of either or thinking and into both and thinking. Like, you are allowed to be frustrated and I'm allowed to be frustrated. It's not, you are making me feel this way and this can't be like that. And you need to change, or I need to do this. It's both and. And that takes it out of this like needing for things to be a certain way, which ultimately, comes from some level of feeling not safe, not trusting, not, comfortable. So it's wanting to protect yourself. And when you start to realize that, I mean, my older twins are 10 years old right now. I will just tell them that made me feel unsafe. Like, I realized that like these changing of plans or this, like, and I want you to get your needs met. And I feel unsafe. Like, how do we negotiate or evolve this together?
Yes.
And I really feel like kids are such powerful mirrors and such powerful teachers if we can allow them to be. I really feel like I learn as much as they probably learn from me. And I don't feel like it's my job, just like I don't feel like it's my job to heal my clients, and it's not my job to, raise my kids to be a certain way. And it's something, my work is to really be as present and as myself as I can be. Mm-hmm. That's what I feel my real purpose is, and to lean into what else is possible in the situation. And so it is something that is, fluid and fresh and is not rigid. Anything, Mussolini has a quote, I still remember this from my political science classes, that stagnation is death. Mm-hmm. And how many of us want so many boundaries and borders and rights and wrongs
and rules, and it's done this way? Yes.
Right? When a river doesn't flow, it dies. When something doesn't move, when air doesn't move, it's stale. It needs the movement and the fluidity. And again, that requires for you to be able to flow. And that means that you've got to take little small leaps and experiments. And this is why, I wanted to say one more thing. Why kids are so good at acknowledging their emotions and releasing. Well, one is they're more allowed than in our society than adults to do that, right? Yep. But two is like animals do this. I remember in grad school, we were learning that like if an animal goes through a trauma, like if it was chased, a deer was chased by a bear or whatever, they will actually have like shakes in their body, and they will go and do things. They are releasing and expressing. They're not holding on to it. And how often we are expected to just sort of like move on and operate, I don't know, in neutral. I don't even know what you call that zone of like, where you're not supposed to be too this and too much and not enough of this. And it's like a narrow, right? It's like a narrow zone of acceptability where you're supposed to be all the time. Right. And I guess you could take enough, medications and things to just kind of be there. But I don't find that to be a sustainable strategy. It might minimize the pain, but it certainly did not maximize purpose or pleasure.
Right. Well, I mean, there's yes to all of what you've just said. And it's fascinating to think of animals doing this. Like, it really is so natural. I was having a conversation with my sister yesterday, and we were raised in a family like, you don't swear, right? There are lines, you stay within them, lots of rules. And, we were given lots of independence as kids too. Like, we were kids that were not really watched over all that much. But sorry, I don't know if you can hear that.
I can hear.
My 3-year-old's having a tantrum right behind this door. Just wanted to make sure that Daddy's paying attention. That said, as adults, like my sister had a really hard day the other day, and I got out this book. There is a hilarious book, but it's a meditation book, and I really want to read it, except it's somebody else's work. But basically the gist of it is like, you process, like it gets you to this calm space, and then it's like, F that. It's very like, I walked my sister through it really as a joke because I just felt like she needed some levity. And we were laughing so hard by the end of it because she was like, yeah, why can't I just do that? Like, why can't I in the middle of the day when something lands on my plate that doesn't belong there or so triggering, just be like, F that. And I'm like, well, why can't you? She's like,
you can with practice.
Right. And she was
with practice, it'll become your new normal.
Well, and just as a way to release it, right? Not even really because of the swearing, but because it allows that moment of like, I'm going to let that go like a balloon.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to say it to anybody. You can just say it to yourself. No, don't like that. I am a big proponent of expressing, and my kids have a swear jar, and I am the biggest contributor to that jar.
Well, there really is a genius to it. My sister was like, you know what? Why can't I do that? And I was like, well, I think you can. And she's like, my coworkers who are male are, and they don't let it get them down. They're just like, oh, F that. And then they just move on. And I'm like, there you go.
Yeah.
We do not have to carry this stuff. And I think as adults, you're right. This zone of like what's acceptable and where we can process and how we can show up is
really it's zone of acceptable is for other people so that you make as little discomfort to them as possible.
Yes.
Right. And are you really going to spend your life trying to fit into all these places to be the quietest, meekest, most acceptable version? There's a quote by, it's in my book. I just forgot the name of the person, but
That's okay.
wow. Okay. I we'll need to remember, but it is attributed that like, and now I'm going to butcher the quote.
No, that's okay. I do this all the time.
The world is not changed by reasonable men.
Yes.
Like that's right. Just not how it's done. Reasonable people just like sort of stay on
blend
in.
Yep. Yes. That's absolutely right. Well, and a friend of mine on that point, a friend of mine the other day that was posting basically on thought leadership and what it takes to really stand out from the crowd. He's like, not that you have to be, but in some ways you do. You have to be a malcontent. You have to be outside of where everybody else is having the conversation. Like, oh no, that's not actually what's happening. Here's what's going on. Like you're talking about things in entirely different ways. And what I realize is like, you're basically not playing by the rules that everybody else is playing by.
Well, and the truth is there is no solid set of rules. People say that everyone else, like, who's everyone else? And what rules are these? They're highly contextual and every person has their variation, but in your head, it's real that you are different than other people. I'm a big proponent of trial and error. Again, don't trust, test. So experiment. See if it feels better for you to operate in this way, to respond in that way, and use your own, experiential evidence as a way for you to guide yourself. Because it doesn't matter if this worked for somebody else or if it didn't. You are different. And until you test it on yourself, you really can't know with any certainty. But this is where you start to develop that kind of self-guidance.
Yes.
Right? And you start to feel people like, I feel so broken. I feel so lost. It's because they don't feel a wholeness, a connection to all the parts of themselves. So they feel fragmented and disenfranchised because this part wasn't allowed to do this and that part is bad and I got to hide this and people don't like this part of me and I don't like this part of me and this isn't allowed and this. So they're all fragmented. So how can you feel whole? How can you feel like you if you feel fragmented? Wholeness, in my definition, which really is like equivalent with happiness in my book, is that all of you is welcome.
Yes.
All of you is welcome.
Well, and I love that because, and back to this idea about, raising children, we really get to raise ourselves. My son, right? He's got all sorts of stuff going on, but often parts of him are not welcome. And like he can be very energetic and super spastic and really silly. He's highly socially motivated, but he also doesn't yet understand all the rules, right? For what is expected and how people are supposed to show up at school. And so, but this idea that, especially as we evolve into adulthood, that we can embrace those parts of ourselves and have them all be incorporated into a whole person. Like, I just don't think there's any more worthy goal.
I agree. And, it starts with creating a space for him to be himself and also developing others. It's both and.
Yes.
It's like having extra breaks or having more sports during those breaks or having, the kinds of nutrition maybe that makes it feel more sustained or having, if I believe kids are meant to move and bodies are meant to move, period. Yes. So I am a big proponent of go take a break. I always said, go to the bathroom when you need to go to, like, even when my kids were in traditional school, I'm like, you get to be in charge of your body and follow this. If you're not comfortable sitting, right? If you are feeling really whatever, then go and take a break, make room for yourself. And we don't realize that we can change the rules. So he can change the rules. You together can change those. You can talk to his teachers or add more things to the playground. And if you can't, then I feel like it's time to Because there is another level to say, well, this is all welcome. But in this context, like when it's raining, you're probably not going to go swimming. Like in this context, now what can we do with this condition?
Yes.
Like between these hours or at this time in class, this, you can't jump up and yell up and down. But what can you do?
That's right. Get him to help create the solution. And children, I love this concept of just asking the question, because like you, I believe like we're not here to control or even necessarily raise, but to guide our children into who they already are, right? And helping them become those parts of themselves. And, yes, there's lots to learn along the way, but our children come the way they come. They are who they are, and I look at my own two little people, and yes, I think that this idea of like, how do we ask better questions is just, it's so critical. And, when you do it right, the results are so profound and so much more beautiful than they could have been.
And you will see the evidence of that almost instantly, which is one of the things that I try to share. It's like, if you don't see a shift from this, and what I mean by almost instantly is in your body immediately when you think this thought and it already feels better, then that's not a green light. That's like essentially saying that's not the direction you want to head. But also once you take those steps, if you're not seeing the evidence of it, now you always get what you want or you get what you need. And the only reason that you get what you need is so that you can get to what you want. So let's say you decide, I want to, go apply for jobs or something, new jobs. And you send out all these applications. And what you wanted was the perfect, interviews and, perfect job position saying yes to you. But what you got was, let's say, crickets. So if you say, how is this valuable? How is this meaningful? How is this for me? And maybe you'll say, you know what? I really didn't like the jobs I was applying to, or my resume, I really didn't do, put all that in there. Or maybe I've been really wanting to go back to school, but I'm too afraid to, because, I'm afraid to go into debt, or I'm afraid to, you got what you needed. And when you take those steps, and let's say you did, like I did, get into debt and go to grad school. And at some point later, you'll stand sort of, 10 steps later and look back and in hindsight and be like, I am so glad that I got that thing that I didn't want at the time.
Yes.
I got what I needed.
Well, and this, and I've used this quote before and I always butcher it, but it's the Steve Jobs quote, which I think applies to everyone. You don't get to connect the dots looking forward, but you always connect them looking backwards, right? And this is why, like what you are describing right here, is you either get what you want or you get what you need. That may be a redirection or may cause you to reevaluate. Like, am I really showing up on paper in the way that I should, if it's in the instance of a job search, and you get to reevaluate that, right?
Or acquire extra skills or change something, you know what I mean? There's so many, again, if the question is, why didn't I get the job, interview? Why didn't they pick me? There's no good answer to that. What is a good answer? Whether it's like, well, you're not the right candidate, or they didn't see your potential, you're overqualified. There's no good answer. A better question is, what is this showing me? Where do I want to take it from here? This doesn't feel good. What would feel better? Right? And I really find that the whole point about that Steve Jobs quote, or anything, is that you realize that the dots are always connected. I don't need to know how. Yes. But I know they are. So let me ask the question, how might this be connected? How might this serve me? How might this be of benefit? What is this showing me? What is this teaching me? And if you're looking at every circumstance as something that has value, then it's very hard to resist or deny or want to crawl out of your skin and be out of there, because you're like, well, I didn't want this car accident. That's for sure. How is this serving me? It is a huge wake-up call to the fact that I'm living my life in the fast lane. I had a couple of car accidents, right in the start of my journey, 2 back-to-back within a month. And they were minor, but it was like, okay, like this is clearly happening. Like there's a message. And I realized that I was so off track that I was literally like bumped along, you know, in my little car to be like, move in the direction that you're like, pull the lever, pull the trigger, like go, because you're sitting there like in this indecision. I was at the time in very big indecision, and that was the hardest place to be.
Yes.
And so I got exactly what I needed. And that one of the people that I got into a car accident with actually gave me a sign of what step to take next. So talk about getting what you needed.
Right. Well, and I mean, even that as an example, being stuck in a place of indecision, which people often are when they feel like they're ready for a change, but they can't decide. I think this fear of regret, like, well, what if I make the wrong decision, right? Versus just recognizing it's an experiment. And how many decisions?
You can't make the wrong decision, and you can't make the right decision, because the decision becomes right when you take it and make whatever you do with it. There are no right and wrong.
This is right. This is why the dots always connect. And it's that very point. And so moving people, I mean, I just think, if we all were able to be more experimental with our life, like, one, we'd have more fun, right? Two, we'd get to where we want to get faster, right? Yeah. And we'd have more clarity along the way.
And it would feel more satisfying when you get there.
Yes.
So it's like a win-win-win-win-win. I know. That's why I'm like, why isn't everybody doing this?
Right? I know. So on that question, why isn't everybody doing this? Bring us up to speed right now. For people who are listening and are like, oh my gosh, I want to connect with Lana. Tell people where you're at online, where you like to connect, and anything that you have currently going on. Like, if you're getting ready to launch a course or a challenge, just talk to us a little bit about what you're up to.
So my book came out earlier this year on Kindle. I manifested the perfect publisher and got picked up, and now have a print book coming out in January 2021. And my audiobook I finished recording a few months ago and is about to be released. I recorded it myself. It was a really amazing process. So you can get any version of the book, essentially, depending on when this episode, when you're listening to it. And in the book, really, you're going to get a lot of the practices, because I believe that it's not about knowing something. It's about practicing and experimenting and seeing the evidence. So my book is a series of essentially experiments that I invite you to take and explore and try on. And the goal is to step outside of what you think is possible, which is where all the juicy stuff is. And then I have a program for those that don't want to spend, 5 years like I did figuring it out and want the fast track, and they are ready for the change. I have a program, my Miracle Mindset program, that creates those results in, record time. And for me, the next sort of level is to, I'm starting a podcast. So I'm very excited about that, is to continue having these conversations and putting this out in the world, because I've already had a YouTube channel, so you can find me everywhere on social media and on my website. And I feel like, podcasting allows for more long form conversations. Yes. So I look forward to being everywhere you can possibly find me, and sort of sharing what to me is still so revolutionary. Like, it was such a major discovery for me, and still continue to find so many. It's more nuanced now, my discoveries, but there's nothing that it's almost like a singer or something that keeps learning more incredible ways to sing and write music, and a painter who figures out better ways to paint, or a piano player I'm excited to create more masterpieces and inspire others to really create a life that feels like an epic, miraculous masterpiece. When you get to the point where you wake up and you just want to pinch yourself. I wake up and I open my shades and I literally have an endless view of the Caribbean Sea. I want to pinch myself. I look over at my husband. I'm like, whoa, like we have dated like 10 different versions of ourselves just through the evolution that we've had. And the relationship we've deliberately built, because it was not what was our patterning, the informative experiences that we grew up with. I look at my kids. I look at the work I'm doing. I mean, it's just like, pinch me. And the challenges that come up are such, I realized that my worst days now would have been my absolute best days, 15, 20 years ago.
Right. Yes.
So I appreciate the level of challenges and problems I have now and my capacity to really ride those waves, right? So connect in any way you feel like on social media, get my book. Let me know. I love hearing how it creates change in your life. We're going to add a link, right? manifest.miracle.com. You can get all the versions of the book that are available. And I'm just excited for you to try this for yourself. If you've made it to the end of this long conversation and something resonated, my biggest sort of encouragement is like, stop listening and go try this.
Yes.
Go try the exercises in the book. Go do these practices so that you become, the person that is shouting this from the rooftop. Oh my God, I can't believe this worked. This changed my life. Wow. Look at these shifts. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this. I'm so grateful. I'm so appreciative. And I just feel like I am living life to the fullest. And I love who I am. There's nobody I'd rather be. That is my wish for everybody.
Oh, well, it's so beautiful. It's such a beautiful wish. If you don't already follow Lana, absolutely go visit her links. I'm going to share all wherever she is online. I'm so excited that you're coming out with a podcast. I'm such a new fan of it and I just love it so much. And for me, it was like, yeah, I love talking to people. I love talking business. I love talking mindset. Like, why not just do this in a more, structured setting and deliver it to people in a way that could really serve them? So congrats. I'm so excited for you. We'll share all those links. And if you're listening, be sure to go visit the show notes, legalwebsitewarrior.com/podcast. And I think you are providing a free gift, right?
Yes, it's a free copy of my book. So if you don't want to go buy it on any of those Amazon, Audible, whatever, you can get a free copy of my book.
That's amazing.
And we'll have a link for you so that I wanted to make this as accessible as possible, right? Like I really want this information out there. If you don't want to interact with me in any way, that's totally fine. You can get the book and then unsubscribe from my mailing list. I really just want this out there in the world.
Yeah. Well, it's, this point about you, and I think we've all experienced this. You don't get the benefits from reading something. You get the benefits from doing something, from practicing it, from trying it. And so I love that you set your book up as a series of experiments. It's exactly what we should be doing. So Lana, I feel like I could just talk to you all day. I'm such a fan. I'm so excited to share this with people. Any final thoughts that you want to leave with folks who have listened this far? Any final words of wisdom, thoughts, encouragement? What would you say?
I say, fuck it, go for it.
Bleep. I'm kidding. That's awesome.
Go for it. Nike has the slogan, just do it. It really is. You can't get it wrong. Yeah. Michael Beck was saying it's easier to change direction when you're moving.
Yes.
So really just like do something.
Yes. Awesome.
Try something and experiment, and you will be amazed at the journey you'll have.
So fun. Such a great note to end on. Lana, I hope to have you back. Congrats on your book. Thank you so much for popping in and spending time with us here today.
Thank you so much.